Imagine a young general, just 27 years old, face army, a catastrophic defeat. The year is 1796, and what would happen in the next 24 hours would forever change the course of military history. How did Napoleon Bonaparte turn an apparently impossible situation into one of the most brilliant victories in military history? The answer involves a series of decisions that would leave even the most experienced generals speechless. In that sweltering August of 1796 on the plains of Castiglione, a young Corsican was about to prove why his name would echo through the centuries. But what few know is that this battle almost ended in total disaster for the French. Did you know that Napoleon was so outnumbered that his own officers advised him to retreat? However, he had a plan so audacious it seemed madness, a plan that broke nearly every military rule of the time. In just 72 hours, 15,000 French soldiers against 25,000 Austrians. Unfavorable terrain for the French, scarce supplies, exhausted troops after days of marching, and a decision that would change everything in just 15 minutes. What happened that morning in Castiglione was not just a battle, it was a masterpiece of military strategy that is still studied today in the world's top military academies. And the most impressive part, it all started with a move that seemed suicidal. The tactics used by Napoleon in this battle are so revolutionary that they still influence modern military strategies, business leadership tactics, crisis management, decision-making under pressure. In this video, you'll discover the brilliant plan that turned the game, the crucial decisions made in minutes, the fatal mistakes of the Austrians, the lessons that transformed a young general into an emperor, and the exact moment when the battle turned. Get ready for a story that combines brilliant strategy, extraordinary courage, impossible decisions, and an ending no one could predict. How did an inexperienced general manage to defeat one of the most powerful armies in Europe? The answer lies in the next few minutes, and it will forever change your perspective on leadership and strategy. Call to action. Follow every move of this epic battle, where each decision could mean glory or total destruction. This is the story of the Battle of Castiglione, where Napoleon proved that sometimes the impossible is just the beginning. Before we dive into another incredible military story, don't forget to subscribe to the Historia Sem Limites channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. Leave your like and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's explore the world of limitless stories together. May 1796, the French Revolutionary Wars were already in their 5th year, bringing chaos and transformations throughout Europe. On a front often considered secondary, a young general of the Republic named Napoleon Bonaparte began an audacious campaign in northern Italy. He quickly defeated the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia and pushed the Austrians out of Lombardy, securing impressive victories for France. Despite this, 2,000 Austrian soldiers remained trapped in the citadel of Milan, unable to prevent Napoleon's triumphant entry into the city on May 15th. Now settled in the luxurious Palazzo Cerbioni, the French general issued decrees on behalf of the Directory in Paris, while his troops enjoyed a few days of rest. Lombardy began to be reorganized as a French client state, the Cisalpine Republic, with political and economic reforms dismantling the old Austrian order, much to the delight of Italian intellectuals in cities like Milan. However, the French demands for 20 million francs to finance the war, along with requisitions for food, horses, and other supplies, created growing tensions. What further inflamed the situation were the attacks on the property and dignity of the Catholic Church, which angered both the princes and the Italian peasants, fueling anti-French propaganda. On May 23rd, as Napoleon's soldiers prepared to pursue the Austrians, a revolt broke out in Pavia. The next day, riots spread across Milan. Napoleon rushed back to restore order, which he achieves quickly. But on the way to Pavia, he faces fierce resistance. At Benasco, about 1,000 rebels rise up. Colonel Lannes's grenadiers respond with brutal force, killing 100 insurgents and setting the village on fire. A terrible but effective example, writes Napoleon, sealing his reputation as a relentless leader. The next day, Pavia is retaken with little resistance. Rebel leaders, including local princes, are arrested or executed. To ensure the submission of the population, hostages are taken from influential families, forcing them to collaborate. With the situation under control, Napoleon resumes his advance eastward, organizing his army into 4 divisions led by experienced generals generals, including Augereau's advanced guard. The Austrian army, determined to resist, holds its position along the Mincio River, with Lake Garda to the right and the imposing fortress of Mantua to the left. The latter, along with the fortresses of Peschiera, Verona, and Legnago, forms the famous quadrilateral, a defensive system that solidified Austrian control over northern Italy. However, the Austrian commander Beaulieu, unable to predict Napoleon's rapid and strategic movements, makes a fatal mistake. He spreads his troops thin to defend multiple potential crossing points while being distracted by feints near Lake Garda. In reality, Napoleon had decided to cross the Mincio River at Borghetto. When the advanced guard arrives at the location, they find the bridge defended only by a small Austrian force and local militias. The resistance is quickly crushed, but an unexpected counterattack nearly compromises Napoleon's position. Amid the chaos, the general is forced to escape by a dangerous route, supposedly fleeing through the walls of a house, wearing only a shirt to avoid capture by enemy hussars. This dramatic event marks a turning point. Napoleon orders the formation of an elite unit for his personal protection, the Compagnie de Guide à Cheval, led by a young officer named Jean-Baptiste Bessières. This unit would later evolve into the famous chasseurs à cheval of the Imperial Guard, a symbol of the future emperor's power. Surprised by the crossing at Borghetto, Beaulieu retreats to a new defensive line in the Adige Valley. However, at Mantua, he reinforces the local garrison, leaving well-supplied soldiers prepared to withstand a siege for at least 2 months, establishing a new obstacle to the French advance. Napoleon faces a monumental challenge. Mantua, the fortress city, remains impregnable, surrounded by a vast lake on 3 sides and protected by treacherous swamps on the 4th. Its ancient walls seem unbeatable. The most uncomfortable place in all of Italy, laments the French Directory. However, Napoleon's greatest obstacle is not the terrain, but the lack of artillery. Most of his cannons are still in Milan, bombarding the Austrians entrenched in the citadel. Other weapons, which were supposed to arrive by sea, were intercepted by British ships under the command of Commodore Horatio Nelson, further complicating the situation. Since April, Napoleon had already launched 3 relentless offensives, marched over 320 kilometers, and won 10 battles. However, now, before the gates of Mantua, he is forced to pause as the demands on his exhausted troops increase. He must maintain the siege, even without adequate artillery, protect communication lines to France, and suppress any signs of revolt in Lombardy. As if that wasn't enough, the Austrians are reorganizing, reinforced by troops from Germany, and soon they will be ready to counterattack. And the problems don't stop there. The French Directory orders Napoleon to launch an expedition to southern Italy. They demand that he threaten military occupations unless the southern states provide large sums to finance the French war effort. Napoleon reacts vehemently, warning that such a campaign would result in disease, death, and an inevitable disaster. Fortunately, diplomacy eases part of his burden. A harsh ultimatum convinces Naples to sign an armistice, sparing Napoleon from a long march south. Instead, his troops sweep through the Duchy of Modena, the Papal States, and the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, collecting an impressive 40 million francs in tribute from states too weak to resist. Napoleon takes a strategic pause in Florence, where he dines with the Grand Duke before returning to Milan. There, he meets his wife, Josephine, who discreetly arrives from Paris, accompanied by her new lover. However, Napoleon doesn't allow himself to rest for long in the city. The situation demands his immediate attention. Finally, the fortress of Mantua falls, releasing over 150 heavy guns and allowing his troops to advance. Now, he can focus his efforts on the final siege of Mantua. Time is of the essence. In the Tyrol, the Austrian army, reinforced with new troops, begins to reorganize under a new commander. Berlioz is gone, and now the 72-year-old veteran Count von Wormser takes command. A man of tireless courage and surprising vigor for his age, he is determined to avenge Austria's defeats in Italy and reclaim the lost territory. Since crossing the Mincio River, Napoleon has restructured his forces. General Massena's division is positioned near Rivoli, guarding the road to the Tyrol, while 2 of his brigades under General Sori's command are in Salò, protecting the western flank of Lake Garda. General Despinoise's division provides support at Peschiera. Meanwhile, General Augereau's division is around Legnago, monitoring enemy advances, while Monta's cavalry patrols the region. General Serurier's division maintains the siege of Mantua, but Napoleon still awaits a quick conclusion of the siege, something that, unfortunately, is far from being achieved. The Austrian garrison in Mantua is making skillful and active defense, attacking French posts and seizing crucial supplies. Murat, recently promoted to brigadier general, plans a daring operation. He intends to cross the lake at night, disguised in Austrian uniforms, to surprise the enemy troops. However, the mission is aborted when, unexpectedly, the water level of the lake drops drops drastically. Without wasting any time, the French resume their bombardment of the city, firing over 1,000 cannonballs, causing a deadly rain of fire upon the enemy defenses in just a few hours. Mantua is being consumed by flames, but its imposing walls still stand. Time is against Napoleon. The Austrian commander Wurmser finally advances to assist the fortress city, dividing his army into 4 columns. 2 of them march through the Adige Valley, heading directly toward Mantua. Another column veers east, conducting a flank march, while the 4th, commanded by General Kostanovich, heads toward the shores of Lake Garda, aiming to capture Brescia and cut off the French supply line. Meanwhile, Massena, determined, launches a decisive attack at Rivoli, but is forced to retreat, suffering heavy losses. The news quickly reaches Napoleon, who wastes no time and rushes to Castelnuovo, ordering Augereau, Despinoise, and Quilmaine to join as quickly as possible. The situation worsens as Kostanovich's column reveals itself to be the greatest threat. The French forces in Salo are significantly outnumbered, and despite fierce resistance, they are forced to retreat. The following day, the Austrians surprise the French in Brescia, capturing the city and brutally taking a hospital housing 2,000 sick and wounded French soldiers. Amid the chaos, even Napoleon's wife, Josephine, is almost captured, further increasing the tension. Wurmser, with impressive cunning, surprises Napoleon. Already outnumbered and with 5,000 casualties, the French commander sees his left flank disintegrating and risks being surrounded. Never before had Napoleon faced such a severe crisis, a situation that would force him to make a painful and decisive decision. On July 31st, after 2 months of intense fighting, blood, sweat, and sacrifice, Napoleon orders General Serrurier to abandon the siege of Mantua. He sends 2 brigades to reinforce Massena and Augereau, while the rest of his forces remain to protect the retreat communication lines. 179 cannons, along with ammunition and vital supplies that cannot be transported, must be hidden or scattered along the shores. The fate of the French forces now depends on a risky strategy and the desperate resistance of his men. Napoleon knows he needs every available man, as amid the chaos an unexpected opportunity arises. Kostanovich's advance caught Napoleon off guard, but the natural line of Lake Garda separates the French forces from the Austrian troops. Seeing the chance, Napoleon concentrates all his force against Kostanovich, defeats him in battle, and immediately pivots his forces to attack Wurmser. The divisions are ready to move. Kostanovich's soldiers reach Lonato, but find Massena's vanguard already waiting for them. Under a heavy French assault, the Austrians are forced to retreat. The following night, the French retake Brescia, liberating the city and rescuing most of their men, including the sick and wounded. After this advance, Napoleon takes a brief rest. Wurmser, still under pressure from Massena's forces, finds himself far from Pescara. However, he begins receiving worrying reports about the movements of the French forces, which are now surrounding Mantua. The fortress city is his priority, and Wurmser decides to hurry south, ignoring the threat of Kostanovich and heading toward a city Napoleon had already abandoned. When Wurmser realizes the fatal mistake he has made, it is too late. He has given Napoleon 24 precious hours, time that could be decisive for the outcome of the battle. This failure will be the turning point, and the impending disaster will soon follow. August 3rd is marked by intense fighting to the east of Lake Garda. An Austrian brigade, ignoring warnings, crosses the ravines and advances straight towards Salo, causing great confusion behind enemy lines. However, the Austrians manage to repel 3 attacks at Gavardo, and the situation seems to stabilize. But when their advance meets Massena's division at Lunato, the tide begins to turn again, threatening to reverse the Austrian progress. The counterattack is led by the legendary 32nd Demi Brigade, a unit that would become famous throughout the campaign for its unbeatable courage. Napoleon, with a firm and calculating gaze, does not hesitate to point to it, saying, "Only the heavens can stop you now, 32nd. Maintain your reputation." And so, the Demi Brigade advances, defeating the 1st Austrian Brigade with overwhelming force. Colonel Junot, who had already been wounded 6 times, leads the charge, relentless, until finally, the enemy command is destroyed and Kostanovich's force is defeated. But the victory comes at a high cost. Napoleon, concerned with the developments of the battle and the lack of news about Wurmser, makes the difficult decision to send his troops on a dangerous route around Lake Garda to try to reunite with the rest of the army. The next day is even more tense. 15 miles to the south, General Augereau's division is facing fierce resistance from Austrian troops near Castiglione, struggling to keep Wurmser contained while Napoleon focuses on Kostanovich. Augereau, with his characteristic audacity, launches a furious attack against General Liptay's vanguard, pushing it back into the hills around Solferino. But the battle is not easy. Liptay receives powerful reinforcements, and the tide of war begins to shift. Austrian forces begin to press from all sides, but Augereau does not yield. Even under a cavalry charge, he resists bravely, preventing the Austrians from advancing. Although Although the battle is exhausting and painful, the French commander never loses his confidence, fighting with a determination that would be remembered throughout history. Napoleon, watching from afar, will never forget the sacrifice and strength of Augereau's men. 12 years later, already emperor, Napoleon would recall Castiglione with affection, naming Augereau King of Castiglione, and at the same time silencing his critics with a simple phrase, "It was he who saved us that day." But that night, the situation was desperate. Augereau's division was on the verge of collapse. Fatigue, hunger, and thirst consumed the soldiers, and the commander, his face marked. Due to the tension, he sends one last appeal. "If you do not send reinforcements, we will not be able to hold any longer." The following morning brings a new breath of hope. The French army launches a final attack against Kostanovich, and, to everyone's surprise, he begins to retreat. A major disaster is avoided when 3 lost Austrian battles reach the French headquarters in Lunato. What seemed like an imminent defeat turns into an unexpected victory, thanks to the strength and resilience of the men who, under Napoleon and Augereau, fought until the last breath. The Austrians, aware of the growing pressure, call on Napoleon to surrender. But he, with his characteristic cunning, responds brilliantly. He orders his grenadiers and artillery to position themselves strategically in a decisive maneuver. He then issues an ultimatum to the Austrians. Either they surrender immediately, or they prepare to face the fury of his swords. The tension in the field is palpable, but even with few men around him, Napoleon exerts his leadership with unwavering confidence. Slowly, the Austrian soldiers, faced with overwhelming pressure, begin to raise their arms in surrender. With that, Napoleon turns his forces to attack Wurmser, but the Austrians face a tough decision: surrender or try to retreat to a safer position behind the Mincio River. Wurmser, determined to fight to the last, chooses to resist. He plans to buy time, engaging Napoleon so that Kostanovich can regroup and resume his advance, while Mantua remains his main priority. His strategy is clever, but his judgment fails when he underestimates how quickly Napoleon's forces will move. On the night of August 5th, the Austrian army finds itself only 4 miles west of Castiglione, forming 2 battle lines. The northern wing is aligned with the high ground of Solferino, while the southern wing is positioned near the fortified Monte Medullano. Napoleon once again brings his strategic force into play, with Massena's division to the north, Augereau's division in the center, and cavalry to the south, creating a threatening formation. Although the situation seems balanced, Napoleon is far from inferior. He has 10,000 additional men quickly converging on the battlefield. 5,000, under General Despinoir, are marching to press from the rear, and another 5,000, under Fiorella, are coming from the south, ready to deliver the decisive blow. The balance of power will soon be broken, as Napoleon once again proves his ability to turn adversity into overwhelming victory. To buy time for these forces to arrive and knock Wurmser out of position, Napoleon orders Massena and Augereau to attack. There is a short exchange of fire. Then the French begin to fall back. Take the bait, some units advancing from the heights, while Wurmser extends his right wing, trying to outflank Massena's division. Around 9 a.m., the sound of gunfire from the south alerts both sides to Fiorella's arrival, behind the Austrian left flank. Napoleon immediately orders Augereau and Massena to attack again, with determination. The Despinois forces arrive to join the assault, but Napoleon entered the hunt too early. Wurmser is not yet fully committed and reacts quickly. He organizes a new line to push back Fiorella and quickly pulls back his left flank. However, he cannot save the hunt at Monte Medullano. Napoleon aids the field with Major Marmont. He brings in a battery to fire on the position. Their guns fire a cannon blast, clearing the way for an attack. By 10 a.m., the reserve grenadiers charge forward with bayonets fixed, pushing the Austrians off the island. Meanwhile, to the north, the 4th and 5th Brigades emerge toward Alfarinas. They take down the redoubt in front of Pozzicatana. Fueled by their strength, they blow up the Solferino Tower and travel beyond, the enemy in shock retreating in disarray. The Austrians are pressured along the line, and now the French cavalry and Fiorella's forces threaten to cut off their retreat. While Napoleon is immersed in the battle, energized and tireless, urging his troops forward, Wurmser seems paralyzed. An experienced commander, he is in shock, practically unaware of what is happening around him. A French immigrant who was observing him reported that Wurmser seemed to have become a shadow of himself, unable to see, hear, or speak. That man, with his head covered in white hair, had lost the ability to react, almost as if the weight of the situation had completely consumed him. Finally, after a moment of complete paralysis, Wurmser makes a decision to order the retreat to the safety of the other side of the Mincio River, protected by his cavalry. With some reinforcements, he attempts to buy time, but the relentless pursuit of Napoleon's troops gives no respite. The French forces, after a week of marching in exhausting heat with almost nothing to eat or drink, are on the verge of collapse. However, Napoleon, ever tireless, is pleased with what his troops have managed to achieve. Wurmser's army finally finds refuge behind a mansion, but Napoleon acts quickly, deciding to resume the offensive without hesitation. Massena is sent north to relieve the pressure on Pescara, while Napoleon threatens the Austrian retreat line. In response, Wurmser realizes that the situation is unsustainable. After ensuring that the provisions of Mantua are fully replenished and reinforced, he decides to retreat to Tyrol, seeking to reorganize and rethink his strategy. Meanwhile, the French continue their victorious march, leaving the Austrian army behind, now forced to retreat. Napoleon, facing challenges that tested his limits as a commander, has just gone through the toughest trial of his career. Although initially pressured by his adversaries, his strategic flexibility and tireless energy have led him to triumph, transforming an apparently desperate situation into an impressive victory. However, Mantua remains the key to controlling Italy, and the Austrians, despite their defeat, will do whatever it takes to try to save the city. Wurmser, defeated, retreats, but he will return, and when he does, he will face Napoleon in a direct confrontation, ready to launch his own attack on new ground in Austria itself. As Napoleon prepares to face new challenges, the battle for Mantua's control continues to be a strategic chess game, where every move could decide the fate of all of Italy. But what will happen next? How will Austrian General Wurmser react after this crushing defeat? Don't miss the continuation of this fascinating story, where the fate of empires and the courage of incredible men intersect in an epic battle for supremacy. If you enjoyed this intense, twist-filled story, subscribe to the channel Historia Sem Limites and turn on the bell to make sure you don't miss the next videos filled with thrilling accounts and historical events that change the course of the world. Stay tuned and be part of this unique journey. See you in the next video, where we will uncover more secrets of significant moments in history. Until then.